Well, my American brothers and sisters, it appears as though the party's back on. Game on, as we say in Canadian street hockey. Once again, a week ago, we loved each other. Yesterday, we were booing each other's national anthems. Now today, we've reestablished our kinship ties once again because the situation has been resolved. Now, I got some interesting information to share with you that I guarantee you nobody else is going to connect these dots. I had a eureka moment tonight, and before you get down there and dogpile in the comment section, I know you're going to say, oh, here he is, smoking that John McAfee again. Yesterday, I was scaring the women and children with my rather ostentatious presentation, but sometimes wild times call for even wilder riders, and that's how you stay ahead of the curve. But understand that it's all going to make sense in just a moment when I give you the big enchilada. I figured it out. I figured out exactly what all this border stuff is about, how it ties into World War III and U.S. financial hegemony, the full meal deal. Now, let's first debunk all this shit that is going on today. No, Justin Trudeau did not bend the knee to Donald Trump. In fact, Donald Trump was kind of left dumbfounded because he forgot who he was messing with. He forgot that there was nothing that Trudeau would like more than to lock his people down into some sort of dependent relationship that relies on government subsidization because they were all put out of work because of a trade war so that they can win more votes. He forgot who he was messing with, okay? So Trump thought, okay, I'm going to try to, because this is nothing to do with border security. Get that out of your mind. People are thinking that this has anything to do with trying to save some drug addicts, bless their souls. I hate to see that stuff, but that's not what this is about. The elites don't give. They wouldn't piss on a drug addict if they were on fire. Okay, that's just the reality of it. The Canadian border, it's unenforceable. It's too big. If you can't get the Mexican border locked down, where you got militias with machine guns the whole way through, and you got walls and all the rest, you think you're going to police the Canadian border? Both Trump and Canada know that this is just a pipe dream. But I'm going to tell you what the real motivation was. Now, the agreed upon terms for the deferment of the imposition of these tariffs 1 month from now is the exact same plan. Exact. There's been nothing new except that Trump is now going to pay $200 million. Okay, so we thought, you guys thought this was not going to cost you anything, and now it's going to cost you $200 million. Back in December 17th, the Trudeau government, if you can call it a government, and no, I don't like Trudeau. Hate's a strong word. I'm not going to say hate, but you guys know I got to say that, because if I don't, people are going to be like, oh, cope. It's not cope. I think they're all bullshitters, okay? December 17th, they put this out. Government of Canada announces its plan to strengthen border security and our immigration system, backed by an investment of $1.3 trillion. Well, what does Trump have to say today? How did Trudeau bend the knee? Let's see. Canada will implement their $1.3 billion border plan as per government. Okay, yeah. Reinforce the border with new choppers, technology. Yep, that's all written in there already. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel will be working on protecting the border. Yep, I mean, that's already kind of factored in. And really, that's all semantics because that includes the people who are already working in the border and maybe the additional 1,000 or 2 who are going to be hired for that purpose. Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. A czar? Really? We're doing czars now? All right. We will list cartels as terrorists. Yeah, I mean, that's an easy win. There's no reason why the Trudeau government wouldn't do that. Ensure 24/7 eyes on the border. No, you won't, because the border is so massive, there is no possible way in hell that you would police the American and Canadian border. And quite frankly, it would be a waste of money, to be brutally honest. It just would, okay, for reasons that I'm going to get into, because ultimately it's all about the harmonization of the Americas and the consolidation into one economic bloc. Launch a Canada-US joint strike force to combat organized crime. That is part and parcel. That is probably the only unique thing out of here that was gained from this. Fentanyl and money laundering, which, yeah, again, they don't care about. I have also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. So, they're going to kick in $200 million to the plan that the Canadians already agreed to, and people are acting as though that's a win for Trump. Okay, if you say so, he can bloviate about that for a month, and then we'll see what happens in the future. I'm going to tell you what's really going on, though, right now. Okay? I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Now, on the surface, the Ralph Nader analysis, that level of analysis, which is like 50 levels below Nate's analysis, this is market manipulation, okay? The plunge in the stock market based on Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada was suddenly reversed when he paused for a month. The market surged back somewhat. This is the first of many vast insider trading opportunities for the Trumpsters who get advance notice about how Trump's impulsive actions are going to be announced. I agree. It's hard to agree with that, hard to disagree with that, I should say, because indeed, when you're so close to Trump, when you're in his inner circle and you're hearing the conversations, and I don't know what level of confidentiality there is amongst Trump's family members and his close friends, as there would be in any administration. And I'm not saying that this is something unique to Trump. This happens with everybody. Look, if you followed Nancy Pelosi's portfolio for the last 4 years, you would be rich. You would have beat the market by hundreds and hundreds of percentage points. So this is in no way meant to be solely a criticism of Trump, but indeed that's what it is. I mean, you got Eric Trump today tweeting out something about how you should buy Ethereum. So don't think for a second that if you knew that there was going to be a deal struck and that this was all bluster, then of course you would buy the dip because you know there would be a bounce back. Now, this could also be stress testing of the markets. The other explanation is that the markets were crashing more than they initially expected, perhaps, which I can't see how that's possible because it should be obvious to anybody with half a brain that a massive trade war like that will obviously tank the markets. That could be one possible explanation. Maybe it was going a little too far. Maybe the algorithms were right at the tipping point where had it gone further, the whole thing would have just collapsed precipitously. But they brought it back, okay? They brought the plane back up again. This could have been a diversionary tactic just to take attention away from, whatever scattershot executive orders are being rolled out at this point in time. Nobody's looking at Iran, and we're going to talk about Iran and Russia in just a moment for your Iran-Russia bros. And this could also just be another step towards consolidation. And the deferment was just to get the markets a bit of time to acquiesce to the reality, what this trade war is going to bring, which is great for me because now I can place all my orders from the United States to get stuff up here, because when this inevitably does unfurl, yes, indeed, I do believe that these tariffs will be imposed because Trudeau isn't budging. I mean, this guy ain't messing around when it comes to regulating things and the government controlling your life. I mean, take a look at this. List of products from the United States subject to 25% tariffs effective February 4th, 2025. I don't know if there is a counterpart document in the United States, but this thing has to be hundreds of pages long. Maybe not hundreds, but definitely 100 pages long. I mean, I would be scrolling here probably for a good 15 minutes to get through the entire thing of all of the HS tariff codes. It's extensive and it covers everything, pretty much all types of food, all types of products, everything. I mean, they came correct. They came, not correct, but they came fully loaded, ready to go. And perhaps Trump underestimated Trudeau's desire to win more votes and stay in power. He underestimated how authoritarian our leadership actually is and how willing they are to commit and kneecap their own population for the sake of staying in power. Because I think they realize, the liberals realize that's the only way they're going to hold on to power is if a trade war happens and they can create some codependency on the government and get everybody dependent on those stimmy checks. That's the only way it's going to happen. So maybe Donald Trump was kind of taken aback by this and said, we're going to have to put this on hold for a month. Now, I don't know what's going on with the border in Mexico. It could very well be that the president of Mexico blinked twice, indicating that they wanted help. And in fact, I'm actually of the belief there's probably a lot of people in Mexico who, without saying the quiet part out loud, they do want U.S. interventionism in some way to quell the problem with the cartels. I think, of course, the political establishment there is largely, I would presume, beholden to these organized crime networks, and I'm sure there are some Democratic purists there who do want honest government, but they can't because they'll be assassinated. I'm not saying that the leadership there does not benefit. I don't know them from a hole in the ground, but looking at the situation, I can surmise that there's very likely people within that government that would not like nothing more than see the cartels defeated, okay, so that they can actually get on with their country. You'd have a stable border. So in that respect, maybe there was some agreement there, because now they're already flying rivet joint planes around the Gulf of California there, and it appears as though they're taking this very seriously, and potential war against the cartels is in fact in the cards. Now, here's the problem. I told you I was going to give you the big enchilada. For those of you who've waited 10 minutes and 45 seconds, here we go. Let's channel John McAfee. McAfee? Hide the children, hide the women, because the truth's coming out. Just kidding. The women can stay. The Triffin Dilemma. A nation that issues a global reserve currency will damage their export economy. What is the Triffin Dilemma? Here's what's going on, okay? Understand this. Right now, the U.S. is the global reserve currency. But as Marco Rubio stated today in a Fox News interview, he stated that the Brazilians and the Chinese are now going to be trading in their own currencies, and the BRICS nations will be trading in their own basket of currencies, and quite possibly gold and precious metals or some other financial instrument. Now, what most people are seeing right now is the BRICS currencies crashing against the dollar. So they presume that, these BRICS currencies are never, this is not a hope in hell of ever replacing the US dollar, right? Well, the problem is, if you look back at World War II, right after World War II, I believe it was 1946, that the British pound was at its peak. It was somewhere in and around there. Maybe it was dead center in World War II. The British pound, 90% of the global reserve currency. 5 years later, it was 15%, 20%. And then a few years later, it was maybe 5%, okay? So what I'm saying is, you can have market dominance, international hegemonic monetary dominance 1 year, and then 5 years later be in a completely different situation. Now, the Triffin Dilemma is something that it's very important for people to understand. And I wasn't aware of this terminology. I kind of intuitively understood the concept, but I wasn't aware of this until the weekend when I was doing some research. And essentially what it is this idea that if you are the issuer of global debt, global currency, American dollars, the petrodollar, if you want people to trade in your dollars, as Trump has said, he wants BRICS countries to trade in dollars, and if they don't, then the US is going to impose tariffs and we will force them to trade in dollars, right? Which seems, stepping outside your boundaries of what a sovereign nation should do and respecting the sovereignty of other nations. But understand the Triffin Dilemma is such that in order to issue that debt, you must incur a trade deficit. You have to be at a trade deficit in order to be able to give people more paper than the stuff that you get back. So you're giving less stuff and you're giving more paper, and that paper is used by countries to transact as the global reserve currency. So Triffin's Dilemma is, once again, it is such that if you want to have the global reserve currency, the global credit card, the ability to really print money with impunity, then you have to be willing to incur a trade deficit. If you can't have both, okay, because that's the main way you're getting dollars out there to people is through trade deficits, okay, and that has enabled us to become a service-based economy. It has brought us all kinds of disproportional wealth and prosperity. It might not look like it. It's just because a lot of it is being, concentrated in the hands of an elite group of people. And really, at the end of the day, we are getting all the stuff. People are sending us the stuff. I say we. I use Canada and the United States synonymously, which I probably shouldn't at this point because it's confusing for people. But essentially, that's Triffin's Dilemma. Now, if you're Trump and you're endgame, and you know World War III is coming, then you're front-running things and you're getting ahead of it because you know that BRICS will be transacting in their own currencies ultimately. And you know that cryptocurrency is on the horizon, And there's going to be some blend of that and precious metals and countries' own currencies that they use to transact with in the future. They're not going to need the SWIFT system. They're not going to need US dollars in order to transact. And you also know that if your currency is pegged to the petrodollar, then you are kind of tied to the global oil prices. And you can't price oil in your own dollars, which would bring prosperity to your own country. So Trump is saying, all right, screw the global reserve currency. We're going to go all in. We're going to impose tariffs on everybody. I'm sure there's some macroeconomist somewhere in Trump's camp that understands the Triffin Dilemma and understands you can't have both of these things. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't give out the global debt and expect not to have a trade deficit. It just doesn't work that way. So he knows BRICS is long gone. He knows they're going to do their thing, right? But he's just getting ahead of it and saying that, okay, we're going to concede the global reserve currency and we're going to start imposing tariffs in order to resolve this trade deficit ahead of what we know is coming, with the hope that perhaps Canada, maybe Mexico will come to heel, because ultimately they will have to have us on board for what's coming. This is why they're mobilizing in the Arctic. This is why they're starting to look at interventions in South America, particularly in the Venezuela regions around there. And this is why, that's protectionism, it's isolationism. It's like I said yesterday, okay? When borders stop transiting, or when goods stop transiting borders, armies do, okay? That's the gist of it. There's more and more people who want to consume more and more stuff, and there's less stuff to go around. We enjoyed the heyday of globalization and just-in-time delivery systems, and now everybody is receding into their protective shells because things are getting tight. Things are getting down to the wire. And when the US debt bomb implodes, when those dollars start to come back in mass, which could happen at any moment, when they realize that there was a rehypothecation of funds in that, anyways, let's not go there. But what's going to happen is that ultimately it's going to get to the point where the US dollar will no longer be the global reserve currency. And that's when you potentially have the prospect of war, because that dollar and global trade is what prevented war from arising. It was a hedge against war. Globalization and global trade, as much as people say globalists, it is a hedge against nuclear war, because why would you go to war with somebody if you had a vested interest in, if you needed them to build something so that you could get richer? So now that is going away, they're trying to shore everything up. And this thing with Canada, I think, really ultimately will end in some form of a deeper economic consolidation within the Americas. I just don't know how exactly we're going to get there. Maybe they'll come to some terms, and maybe this will be a way to, kind of just defer it long enough. Maybe Trump is now realizing that Trudeau actually wants this, and so they might just let the thing fizzle out. It's possible, because there's never going to be a dull moment, especially in the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, when they have the Senate and the House and the presidency, right? So anyways, that's what's going on. That's it in a nutshell. Okay, it's basically that the US dollar is losing its global status, and you wouldn't notice that by looking at it, because the dollar is still incredibly strong compared to everything else. But remember, that is exactly what happens before the currency crashes. And usually it has something to do with the debt that's been accumulated, okay? So anyways, that's what's going down. John McAfee, we're channeling him today. Okay, so now what's going on with the Iranian situation? What was gold doing today? Did gold hit another record high today? Yes, it did. In fact, intraday trading, there was something like 41.50 Canadian. I think now it's retraced to like 40.65. So we're talking big numbers. And I forgot to mention how the repatriation of gold factors into all of this. So the London exchange, where they hold the COMEX gold, has seen record withdrawals. Let me see if I can pull up that slide here. In terms of the contracts that were closed, 40,649 contracts completed. Compare that to January, where it's 22,000, and December, where it's 25,000. So they hold the gold, and there is a lot of, what would you say, there's a lot of claims on this gold. This is the COMEX market, how it works. So it's a way, I guess, to trade in gold and also store your gold safely, or have like an IOU, how money used to be, right? Where you could take a banknote and that banknote would say you can exchange this for 1 ounce of gold regardless of what the price of gold was. You can't do that anymore. It's worth $1. It's not worth 1 ounce of silver or whatever it was at one point. This kind of is very similar to that, in that there's a bunch of gold that is stored typically in London or New York, and people can buy shares of that gold. The problem is that there's a 50 to 100 to 1 ratio in terms of what's lent out to what's in the vaults. Now they can do this, and this is where the term rehypothecation comes in, because you're essentially lending on the basis, you're lending multiple times on the basis of solitary collateral. So you have one piece of collateral, 1 ounce of gold, and you can give 50 to 100 IOUs out for that one piece of gold, hoping that not everybody comes back at once. That's what's called a bank run, essentially. But this is the ultimate bank run because it pertains to precious metals. Now, if everybody comes back knocking at the same time, you get a bit of a crisis and you get a bit of a backlog. And that's what they're experiencing right now in London. But this maps on perfectly to my hypothesis that Trump knows that the US dollar is almost done. And by almost, I mean years, not decades, okay? And they're repatriating the gold. They're shoring everything up. They're trying to onshore everything as rapidly as possible, disintermediate the global network and supply chain of reliance, and basically secede the, how should I say, they're trying to concede the US as a global reserve currency. Get my words mixed up here. And for the sake of having their own domestically produced industrial base. That's what's going on. That's it in a nutshell. I don't think I have to, embellish it any more than that. That's what's going down. And Netanyahu is in town, apparently, and the United States has committed another $1 billion to Netanyahu, and there's people around him who are saying, hey, this is the best, most optimal Goldilocks zone period of time that we're going to have to attack Iran. Never have the stars aligned like they've aligned right now. They're trying to convince Trump to allow them to do that, okay? And it appears as though Trump is saying, do whatever you want, because he's saying, hey, you want the West Bank? Take the West Bank. You want to, we'll get rid of this Human Rights Council with the UN, and we'll get rid of all these things. We'll say it's to do with spending, and, never mind the ICC, that Biden already bucked that. So basically the stage is set, because you're never probably going to have a more optimal time than now. You have 3 branches of government, all run by the same people who are all effectively overseen and in some way, shape, or form greatly influenced by Zionist lobbyists, and even people within the positions, the various secretaries of fill in the blank, are ardent Zionists. And now the only thing you really need to kind of seal the deal, you already have your excuse. So what they're trying to do now is create a narrative that indeed the Iranians are about to get nukes, and we got to stop them from getting nukes. And hence this Telegraph article that was released today that says Iran secretly behind nuclear missiles that can hit Europe. Now the Telegraph, at least at one point, was a fairly reputable news service. The problem with this is that they're getting this information from a group called the Exiled National Council of Resistance of Iran, the NCRI, which I presume has ties to the exiled Shah of Iran. And I suspect that there's probably just a little bit of bullshit, but a little bit of truth to this. I mean, if I'm Iran, I'm trying to get nukes as fast as I can, because you look at North Korea, you look at who they don't mess with, it's the people who have the nukes. So the window is closing for Iran to get nukes. Now, for the Telegraph to be so absolute in their language about this, is quite telling, because that means that there indeed is a broader narrative being crafted here, and they're doing it piecemeal. So, they can't just outright come out and say, yeah, Iran has nukes, but they need all these little points of speculation. Like last year, there was a nuclear weapons inspector who had first put out the story that Iran has enough fissile material to create a nuclear weapon in 10 days. Now they're basically saying that they're already doing it because they already have information that confirms this. Now, specifically, they're talking here about the warheads, which can reach 3,000 kilometers. Now, they don't really specify the type of technology that makes this distinct from Iran creating any other type of 3,000 kilometer missile, which they have in their arsenal, and they've had that for some time. But noticing the framing here, hit Europe, okay? So clearly what they're trying to do is win votes with the Europeans and say, we need to focus, and this is a British publication, so the Brits are in some ways assisting in the shift towards, I don't want to say a shift outright, but a refocusing on the Iranian front. Revolutionary Guard aerospace experts working on warheads with a 3,000 kilometer range at sites disguised as satellite launch bases. Now, in terms of the nuclear question, the missile designs are based on North Korean technology, with the Semnan site developed Simorgh missiles similar to the North Korean UNHA-1. I don't have the maps here today, but the original article on the Telegraph has all of the maps, okay, if you wanted to go and see. The exiled National Council of Iran accuses the regime of accelerating its nuclear weapons program under deceptive pretenses while exploiting international leniency. So they're basically getting people primed. Now, I don't think they can fight a war with Iran and a trade war with Canada at the same time. We've seen what happened with the price of oil as soon as the announcement was made by Trudeau that they were going to be doing counter tariffs. The price of oil not only shot, I think it was up about 3%, but on top of that, the US dollar index was actually up about 2%. So compounded, that's about 5% increase in the price of oil in real terms. So that was just from the shock of maybe a 10% tariff imposed on Canadian crude, which would still, when you factor in the discount that we sell it to the Americans for, would still be receiving it, I think, at spot price for the most part. But don't quote me on that. I know we give it to you guys at a discount, okay? So if that little bit of extra demand crunch or supply crunch is going to move the needle that much, they have to be very careful with what they do, because Saudi Arabia is not completely on deck yet, and it's not really certain what OPEC is going to do in terms of their commitment of lowering oil prices. So basically, the Israelis and the Americans can go to war with Iran, because remember, once Iran starts, the Strait of Hormuz closes potentially, oil flows could potentially be brought down about 20% worldwide, and a 20% worldwide cessation in the flow of oil would likely lead to a 100% fold increase in the price of oil, just because of the demand bullwhip effects of the market, right? Now, let's go to Russia. So right now in Russia, as is the case, every single day, another oil refinery or gas refinery is being destroyed by Ukrainian drones. And I don't know how much longer they can continue with this. Now, Trump knows that he can't come out and invite Zelensky to Washington and engage in all the political niceties, because it's not popular with MAGA, right? Zelensky is just not popular with MAGA. Now, Trump, he's got a very devout following. I'm sure if he wanted to, he could get people interested in the Ukrainian cause once again. But it's very likely that they're not going to do that. They're going to have to replace him with somebody. I think they're going to replace Zelensky this year. And I think Zelensky is not going to complain about that. But the weapons flows have recommenced to Ukraine once again today. Now, they didn't stop entirely, But now all aid to Ukraine has now recommenced. This at a time when Russia is being hit hard, okay? And Zelensky is asking for frozen Russian assets to be used to buy weapons. So essentially, nothing has changed in the policy from Biden and Trump with respect to Ukraine. So that's what's going down. Shit's still escalating. In fact, Trump has now said, we want some of those rare earth minerals and metals that you guys are in possession of. The problem is the overwhelming majority of all of the money that's in Ukraine is in the hands of Russia right now. And that is why they want this region, in fact. Because when you really look at it, I mean, 90%, you got 3.2 trillion, 10 trillion, you got about, I don't know, 11 to 12 trillion dollars right here. And that dwarfs everything else. I mean, this combined, maybe you're getting a trillion or two. There's maybe like $2 trillion worth of resources that way of this line. And what Russia controls, a good part of it anyways, and what they aspire to control is the 11 trillion or so of resources. And so if Trump is saying, okay, we'll send you weapons, but we want stuff in return, where are they going to get that stuff? And doesn't that mean that they're going to have to help Ukraine take back this territory? I think it does, because a lot of this is like farmland and stuff, as far as I know. So, yeah, that's what's going down. The war is going to continue to ramp up. Market cap weight of the top 10 largest stocks is the highest it's ever been. So what this means is that the biggest stocks, like I don't know what are the tech stocks? They used to be called the FANGs. I don't know what they are now. Basically, they are taking a larger proportion of the market than the dot-com bubble, than what appears to be, well, the 1929, but prior to the market crash, everything became really consolidated at the top. And, pretty much every other market peak that preceded a crash, that's what happens. So, we're at an all-time high right now. So it's just a matter of time. This probably would have did it, to be honest. But I think the Trump administration was trying to get some concessions out of the Trudeau administration, but they forgot. They misjudged him. They forgot that he's a dictator. Net saving as a percentage of gross national income is approaching the lows of the Great Recession. So it is actually approaching the lows of 2020 once again, which is not good. EU state warns citizens to stock up on food and water. And this is because they're going to be cut off of Russian oil and gas soon. The Estonian government has recommended citizens stockpile food, water, medication, alternative light sources, and even board games in anticipation of potential power outages as the country exits the energy system it shares with Russia on February 8th. It's going to be lights out in that country. The warning was reported by the Estonian news outlet citing the country's Risk Prevention Bureau. Estonia, along with neighbors Latvia and Lithuania, which are all members of NATO and the EU, are preparing to transition to the continental European electricity grid as parts of efforts to cut energy ties with Moscow. Again, that's only going to increase the price of stuff. Remember what all these wars and everything that we're seeing play out right now, that all got kicked off in 2020. There's more and more people. Yes, I know the population is going to plateau around 10 billion. I'm not talking about that. More and more people with more and more consumption, okay, because people are, especially in developing countries, consuming more and more, and there's less and less stuff to go around. Those three things, that leads to war. Batten down the hatches and kill the global supply chain. Russians warned about a locust invasion. An infestation will reportedly hit over 20 regions due to this year's unusually warm winter. A locust invasion spurred by an unusually warm winter is expected to hit 21 regions. So it's going to be biblical. The report stated that the number of regions exposed to the locust infestation during this agricultural season has increased by more than 30%, with the total area to be treated increased by 100,000 hectares or 1,000 square kilometers, will result in a 30 to 50% increase in agricultural pests. And all of this, of course, means you got to use more chemicals, you got to use more insecticides. You know, all of this stuff is just straining the global supply chain. And, well, people say that the warm weather is great. I guess we'll see. Let's see what happens. AI is here to save the day, though. As I previously indicated, I've been talking about this for a while. Basically, we're at the point of AI being smarter than a human who's doing their PhD. Now, it depends on PhD in what. I presume PhD in physics or something. Something really smart, some STEM. Well, we're already close to the limit of how smart you can get on a scale of how smart humans can get. So we're pretty much getting ready to smash through this thing onward and upward to the singularity. And that is why they're hooking us up to Skynet. I can't believe that story about the US hooking the military nuclear weapon systems up to ChatGPT-4 didn't get barely any media attention. I made a video on it, but I think we're going to have to make another video on that because that story went under the radar with this blitzkrieg scattershot of news stories that we've been experiencing lately. It's hard to keep pace with everything. I got to say, you know, I'm thinking more and more of Warren Buffett. This guy's the ultimate gray man. He's accruing this massive cash stockpile. I think something to the effect of $350 billion. He lives in a house, which I believe back in 2021 was valued at about $650,000. Okay, the guy keeps his mouth shut. He's not like me. He doesn't, you know, channel John McAfee, right? He's not like Elon Musk. He doesn't go and blah, blah, blah online. And in fact, I would say that Warren Buffett is still probably the richest person in the world, even though, you know, when you're talking about liquidity, he's probably the most liquid billionaire there is in the world. And there's something to be admired about a person that just keeps their mouth shut and plays the long game, doesn't get caught up in the stonks, and just waits there and sits idly in the shadows. He's been waiting for a long time because the market hysteria is through the roof and it appears to have no end, but I think he's going to be vindicated in the not so distant future. It's all going to crash on Trump's watch. Our friends over at freeze-dried wholesalers can no longer ship to Canada. Unfortunately, there's just too many border issues, and this is before the tariff. So after, it would have been a nightmare. Fortunately, we still have lots of preparedness food at CanadianPreparedness.com. We've not raised the prices yet because we're trying to get as much as we can. Now that there's been this deferment of the imposition of tariffs, we're hoping that we can stockpile as much stuff as we can just in case. And even if not, things are going to get weird anyways. But freeze-dried wholesalers, Steve Syros, great guy. This is an amazing place to go and get, you know, food. It's a little bit on the pricey side. You can use coupon code Canadian Prepper for 15% off, but they have everything there. Like anything that, you know, post-apocalyptic cuisine that will last 25. Some of it will last even longer, 40 years. Just go and get some. It's good stuff, and you won't regret it. Anybody who's bought and freeze-dried food from us in the past 5 or 6 years has probably made their money back with inflation, like the premium that you pay for the food product. But, you know, I was a little concerned with this whole tariff thing because that could have been something that really, you know, put us out of business, to be brutally honest, unless we would be forced to just be limited to the Canadian market, and our American customers are half our market. So you can still place orders from CanadianPreparedness.com if you're getting better deals with us, which many Americans are, because, you know, we do that free shipping over a certain amount. And right now there's no duties in that direction. So, you know, you might want to capitalize on it, but who knows? You know, Trump is very capricious in his decision making, and this could all just be bloviating for all we know. So let's just wait and see. All I know is that things are just turning on a dime. You know, I mean, I'll often say this, and it sounds trite at this point, but we're living in the age of extremes. And the pendulum is just swinging wildly in one direction or the other. I mean, you have days where an unprecedented event unfolds day after day, whether it was, what was it last week, the NVIDIA thing where NVIDIA plummeted, and it was the most money ever wiped off a stock in the stock market in the history of stock markets. And it's just another day this year, unprecedented drone salvos launched on Ukraine. You don't even hear about that stuff. Just day after day, new breakthroughs in AI, even this trade war thing. I mean, even that Korean thing. Remember that, they declared martial law and it was over in an hour? As quick as they come, as quick as they go now, it seems. So, and maybe that's something to say for the resilience of our global social media network, is that information is also traveling very fast and the markets are almost responding in real time now. Whereas before, I presume in 1929, word had to get around a little bit before the panic started. But now it's just like instantaneous. And people have this real-time feedback loop of market indicators that are telling them what's going on. And then that's being factored into the calculus of things. So that's allowing the bigs, as Salente calls them, to kind of read the room a lot more closely. And if they think that things are getting out of control, they can pull it back. And Trump can say, okay, I got us a deal that the Canadians had made a long time ago. Anyways, price of gold, it skyrocketed, skyrocketed last night to 41.50 Canadian, 4,000, which is really when the Canadian dollar was crashing. Gold was, of course, going up as measured in Canadian dollars, but that was the highest it's ever been. And now it's retraced, I believe, to about 44,060. In real terms, gold is always gold. It's always going to be worth the exact same amount. It would buy you in ancient Rome a nice robe and whatever they wore, whatever kind of jewelry they wore, and it'll buy you the same thing now. It'll buy you a nice suit, one of the best suits, and, well, not one of the best suits, but, very respectable suit. And, that's, what is it now, 3,000, almost 3,000 bucks an ounce USD. Yeah, you can get a pretty damn spanking suit for that. And, so that's the barometer for social chaos, man. Things are getting weird out there, my friends. If you want to support the channel, CanadianPreparedness.com. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.